Hey guys and girls, happy October once again. Hope this video finds you well. This is going to be my latest horror movie review for the month, and it's going to be Season of the Witch, the original Season of the Witch from 1973, directed by George A. Romero. I think actually it's worth pointing out that the other Season of the Witch, starring Nicolas Cage, is a very different film, so I think they probably share a title alone. I'm almost certain that one isn't a remake, but I could be wrong. It's certainly a very different take on the story if it is a remake, but anyway, that's by the by. I just thought I'd point out this is the 70s version. And I guess I'm doing sort of a George A. Romero thing this month because for those of you who's been joining me on my live streams recently, you'll know that I did a live stream of Night of the Living Dead, the Romero original, and a couple of nights later I also did Dawn of the Dead, the follow-up film in his zombie trilogy. So I guess it would be fitting if at some point I did Day of the Dead, the third part. But anyway, I did do those two movies on the live stream, so you can find that up on the channel now if you want to watch that back. So now I'm returning to Romero again, and I guess probably one of his lesser known films in a way, although I guess if you're a hardcore horror fan, this one's quite well known, and it's obviously one he did in between. It came out a few years after Night of the Living Dead and was obviously a few years before Dawn of the Dead. And again, it's a very low budget kind of independent movie where it has that very satirical type feel to it, but quite a different film to Night of the Living Dead. It's not as much of a horror, although there's definitely horror stuff in there, and there are creepy sort of moments, but it does focus really on the satire and some of the kind of trippy stuff happening in the plot. And the plot is basically that you have a housewife who's very much bored with her life, and I think some of her actions around like friends and family lead people to suspect that she might be a witch. And somewhere along the line, as she has like this sort of midlife crisis, she starts wondering herself if she might be becoming a witch, and it's triggered because she has all these different like visions. She imagines all these like various things happening to her, and her body kind of being controlled by what appears to be like dark magic. So she starts believing she might be a witch at some point, and that kind of transpires later in the film, where she actually, I mean, we're getting into spoilers here, but she sort of embraces that, and it explores that path, let's say. But so really it's like a satire of the hysteria of the middle classes, particularly like, I guess, like an arty sort of version of the middle classes. It's a very kind of blunt isn't the right word, but it's a very full-on farcical like satire. There's a lot of like entertaining and hammy dialogue. but also the suspense of it is quite well handled. It's another one like Night of the Living Dead, which really benefits from being very low budget. It's very sort of trippy and psychedelic. It has this really sort of stripped down DIY style feel to it. And as I said, the whole point is for a lot of the film, you're not quite sure if what she is seeing is exactly what is happening. Um, I think also it's quite evenly balanced. I think it does actually, although a lot of the characters around her are quite unlikable. I think the main character is quite likable, actually. I think certainly I sympathised with what she was going through, and I thought the actress did a good job, and she was reasonably engaging as a character, and I was sort of sold on like her conflict. I mean, when she's in this sort of loveless marriage, and her husband's very kind of sort of discarding of her, like he's not very sensitive at all. He's a big business sort of corporate type. I mean, maybe that's a bit harsh to call him that, but certainly he seems very concerned with his business and with his job, and a lot more than his wife. You know, she isn't doesn't seem to be like the priority, and when these weird stuff starts happening to her, he doesn't know how to deal with it. It's almost like he's like too masculine type thing. But the film sets the stage quite well early on, because there's a scene where she's having all these like hallucinations and visions, and it sort of cuts around this stuff, and it sort of cuts to him like jumping at her in bed at one point, and it's just cut in a very like threatening sort of way. And then there's another scene with like him approaching her and like jumping at her when I think she's in the car, and it's like the next morning or something. But it's purposely done in this very like fragmented, off kilter sort of way, where it's like cutting in and out. So the idea is of her like conscious, and her thought process being very like fragmented and sort of all over the place. But yeah, fair to say that this guy isn't the best husband in the world, not the most supportive. And at one point they obviously talk about committing her to like a mental institution, and is she quite stable? And the film definitely has some fun with that. The kind of I think the way a lot of times if things go wrong, or if you have a mental illness, how it's almost a go-to, particularly for a certain type of people, a certain like class of people. Um, and there's just a lot of poking fun at like these sort of parties and these kind of shallow conversations that like housewives have, these particular kind of housewives, and just so just how sort of po-faced and serious they are, and it really gets across the sort of hysteria. But I think it is very kind of even-handed and balanced, because one of the main subplots is that they introduce this character, this I think Billy his name is, who's school, and he gets into a relationship with her daughter, the main character's daughter, and there's like this party where he's like playing a trick on one of her, like her best friend, and it's like this really uptight best friend, and he actually tricks her into like thinking that she's high, that she's taken this drug, and it doesn't go down very well, needless to say, but he's this interesting character because he's like introducing this more laid back hippie element, and he's flirting with the mother very early on, even though he's obviously seeing the daughter, but it's that whole free love sort of lifestyle. But the stuff that goes on and some of the debates between them actually is very interesting, because it's like from the beginning he is very egotistical, it seems, and quite self-centered, and it's almost like playing with that idea of the male ego. But at one point they do actually start having an affair, like the main character and this hippie Billy, because at one point the daughter goes missing. Another example actually of her maybe thinking she might be hallucinating, is that she sort of, after the whole thing at the party, and when her friend had like stormed out really upset, the mother like goes away with her, and the daughter like apologizes because she feels bad about what he did, but then she comes home and they're having sex upstairs basically, and it's quickly revealed that they are having sex. But I think certainly before it's revealed later, I think you're meant to think that maybe they're not, maybe it's just in her head, and it's just the psychology of the thought of your daughter having sex in the next room, and this is what leads to the daughter running away, because she sees the mother and knows that the mother's been there while they've been having sex. But you get this whole thing with like just the loudness of the sex in her head, and it like haunting her and tormenting her, and they sort of use like the thunder outside to like heighten this, so it's really effective in what it does. But yeah, it's quite an interesting relationship with the main character, who's keep forgetting the name actually, but yeah, the main character and this guy Billy, they do start this passionate like relationship, but it's very much a casual thing, or at least he sees it as a casual thing, and they have long debates about, yeah, you know, is this right kind of thing, and just the debate of, you know, having casual sex and stuff, and her need for kind of companionship, if you like, with the way her marriage is going. So I think the film's quite balanced, even though he's kind of a cocky, you know, so and stuff, and he likes, and some of his actions are a bit kind of distasteful. I think it does actually give him like an argument as well, which is quite sort of interesting. But obviously, as she gets more into the witchcraft, it starts freaking him out as well, because she's doing all these rituals. And in case you're wondering, 70s music fans, Donovan's classic song "Single of the Witch" does indeed play, and it plays during a very distinctive sort of scene where she's like practicing witchcraft, where she's buying these books, doing these spells, and she's starting to really get into it. And it's a great scene. They play the song pretty much all the way through. There's some good like musical choices during this film, but I really love that scene. Actually, it does become this moment of empowerment for her. It's very well done, because obviously a lot of this film, it's like satirical and poking fun at this, playing with these ideas, but actually that scene is very empowering, and you're very much with her. And yeah, when it goes to dark places, when she actually, at the end of the film, when she unleashes, her power sort of thing, yeah, it doesn't really hold back. So it's quite an effective little film. I like some of the themes. I like the atmosphere and the mood. I thought the lead actress was good. There's some funny lines. I mean, I learned a good sort of like phrase, which was the husband at one point. He's going off on one about the daughter, and he's like being all threatening about, because he finds out that they were having sex in the house, and the daughter and boy, and he uses this term. It's like, it really burns my butt, which I just think is great. So there's some definitely some cheesy, funny lines, and even though the husband's being a real like dickhead and really aggressive towards his wife and stuff, and you kind of can't help but laugh. Like, him just getting uptight and like moaning all the time is actually really funny. And yeah, there's some really clever bits of dialogue and like gags. So there's one point where they're you got the housewives discussing all this at the party, and she's a witch, and it's like, well, she speaks highly of you as well, which is great. But so there's enjoyable hammy moments like that, or just like funny bits of dialogue. It's not perfect. I think at times it's a bit heavy-handed with some of the symbolism. When it's cut into like images of like statues and stuff like that around the house. It's a little on the nose, some of it, so it doesn't all work, but it's certainly a very interesting film, and I had a good time watching it. I guess you could either take it as just this little quirky, odd,